This morning, the first Australian to die from coronavirus identified. A new plunge on the Australian share market, down at least 2% in morning trade. And a dramatic siege in Melbourne as police hunt 2 armed robbers.
This is 7 News with Ann Sanders.
Good morning. A Perth man who became the first Australian to die from coronavirus, COVID-19, has been identified as James Kwan. The 78-year-old was travelling with his wife, who now also has the deadly virus. The news of his death comes as more Australians returning from overseas are diagnosed.
James Kwan was on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship when the deadly coronavirus broke out. The 78-year-old and his wife among nearly 4,000 passengers and crew stranded in Japan. The couple was part of the Australian evacuation and flown to Darwin for quarantine. It was there Kwan tested positive. He died yesterday in Perth, strict quarantine, meaning he was unable to hold his wife's hand. But she says he passed away peacefully, knowing his family loved him.
She had the opportunity to obviously talk to him prior to his death.
As the deadly virus continues to spread, there's growing calls to enforce wider travel bans.
We see now up close how serious the threat is. I have faith that the Prime Minister is doing the right thing.
Overnight, a 9th case confirmed in Victoria after a woman arrived home from Iran. In Sydney, a traveller returning from the Middle East also infected, while Queensland health officials are preparing for an outbreak after a beautician who contracted the disease while in Iran came into contact with up to 40 people.
Until we have a vaccine developed, which obviously Australia is part of that forefront of response in that area, we need to practice extremely good health hygiene messages and follow the advice.
Georgia Holland, 7 News.
Globally, there have now been around 90,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus, with almost 3,000 deaths. The United States among those countries reporting a patient has died from the disease, while urging its citizens not to panic.
After the first confirmed coronavirus death in the United States, near Seattle, concerns about a possible outbreak. At a nursing home, a resident and a staff member tested positive. Several firefighters who'd been called there have been quarantined, with dozens of people reportedly showing symptoms. The US is now refusing entry to people who've recently been to China and Iran, with Americans being urged to avoid parts of Italy and South Korea, but also not to panic.
There will be more cases.
And possibly more deaths?
And it is possible. For most people that contract the coronavirus, they will recover.
But around the world, there's been growing disruption. More than 50 people have now died in Iran, which has suspended all flights to a city impacted by the virus. South Korea urged citizens to stay indoors as it deals with the biggest outbreak outside China, more than 3,000 cases. Thailand has reported its first death, a 35-year-old salesman who had contact with tourists. As Japan closes schools, its professional baseball teams held pre-season openers in empty stadiums, with people discouraged from lining the route of the scaled-back Tokyo Marathon. The Louvre Museum in Paris was closed as staff discussed the impact of the virus. The French government cancelling all large indoor gatherings.
This is a reality check for every government on the planet. Wake up, get ready.
In the United States, Paul Kadak, 7 News.
The Australian share market has suffered a dramatic new plunge as uncertainty continues over the coronavirus. Our Network Finance editor Gemma Acton is in the newsroom. Hello, Gemma. How big was the hit?
Well, and anyone hoping the weekend would bring some calm to the share market quickly learnt this morning that there's more damage still to come. Within minutes of opening, shares had dropped by 2% and then took another leg lower. The market's now trading around 2.6% below where it closed on Friday. And that brings us back to the ASX 200's lowest level since last May. Over the weekend, China released record low manufacturing numbers, and that triggered further fears about the impact of coronavirus on global growth, and it set share markets on track for more selling this week. Meanwhile, pressure is also continuing to hit our currency hard. The Aussie dollar has now slipped below 65 US cents. Calls for central banks around the world to step in and help are mounting, with expectations growing of another Reserve Bank interest rate cut tomorrow.
Gemma Acton reporting from our newsroom. Thank you very much, Gemma. And 7 News will have special coverage on the coronavirus crisis tonight in our news at 6 and a special report on the latest from 10. Queensland Police have made a major breakthrough in the case of missing toddler Cadence Mills. 2 people known to the child have been charged with her murder after a renewed search for her remains. Lauren Rediex has more.
Cadence DeWita Mills was born in September 2014, but police say the little girl hasn't been seen since 2016. An investigation was launched in November last year when it's believed a family member raised concerns about not having seen the little girl for some time. Officers from the State Crime Command spent a couple of days at a chinchilla address excavating the backyard and could be seen bagging items collected from the dig. At the time, police said the search was part of an ongoing child protection matter. But yesterday came a major breakthrough. A new crime scene was declared at the Chinchilla Weir and 2 people have been charged over her murder. A 40-year-old man and 28-year-old woman, both known to the little girl, will face Dobby Magistrates Court this afternoon. They've been charged with murder, interference with a corpse and torture.
A gang of thieves received more than they bargained for when they tried to rob a supermarket in Melbourne's north. The workers fought back, injuring one of the bandits, despite the would-be thieves being armed with a gun. Cameron Bowe has more.
A gang of 4 armed crooks thought this supermarket at Hadfield in Melbourne's north would be easy pickings, but the father and son owners fought back to protect their business and to save their lives. At around 8:45 last night, 4 males stormed into the shop armed with a gun and a taser. Threats were made to kill the father, who was behind the counter. It's believed that a shot was then fired. The son then came to his father's aid by grappling with the crook who had the handgun.
When I come in from the back, I see him point the gun to my dad. So I say, oh man, that's not the movie, it's the real.
Another shot was fired in what the son says was a matter of life and death.
But at the beginning I thought it was toys. But when I fired when he to grab the gun, it wasn't fired. And I say, oh damn, that's the real one.
3 crooks gave up on their accomplice and fled in a white van as other members of the family who owned the store came to help deal with the armed bandit who was left behind. They had to restrain him for 10 minutes until police arrived. The father and son suffered minor injuries. The would-be armed robber was hospitalised. His 3 offsiders are yet to be found.
After a siege lasting more than 5 hours, police have moved into a hotel in Melbourne's north. 2 armed robbers were thought to be inside. Paul Dowsley is outside the West Meadows Tavern. Good morning, Paul. What did police find?
And they are yet to reveal that, even though it's been an hour and a half since they went inside this pub. Dozens of police have been here since just after 5 because of an alert they got that a woman had been confronted inside by 2 gunmen. When the police arrived, she ran to them and said that the gunmen had held her inside. Now, police weren't sure if those gunmen were still inside, so as you would expect, they turned out in force. The Special Operations Group, the dog squad, the police helicopter was overhead for hours as they tried to determine whether the tavern was empty. Early on, they were using a loudspeaker trying to coax the gunmen out, saying they needed to come out with their arms up, and that even though they went into the pub not expecting the outcome, that they needed to surrender. So, Anne, still not clear if the place is clear inside, but when we get details, we'll bring them to you.
All right, Paul Dowsley reporting. Thank you, Paul. The Prime Minister says he's determined to stop plastic waste choking our oceans, unveiling new measures at the first ever National Plastic Summit. Live to Olivia Leeming in Canberra. Good morning, Olivia. He wants the government to use more recycled products.
Good morning, Anya. Scott Morrison announcing new rules to force government departments to buy more recycled items. Also wants to upgrade key infrastructure to increase their recycling capacity, considering the role the government can play as McDonald's moves to phase out plastic cutlery for wooden utensils and introduce paper straws, while Nestle will trial plans to collect soft plastic waste from more than 100,000 homes. The Prime Minister will also meet with the states in a fortnight to finalise plans to ban exports of waste that can be recycled here. He says Australia must act urgently.
Scientists estimate that in just 30 years' time, the weight of plastics in our oceans will exceed the weight of fish in our oceans. We know there's a problem. What we have to focus on are the practical solutions.
Olivia, in other news today, another asylum seeker boat has been stopped in Australian waters.
Yeah, the Home Affairs Minister has confirmed this morning that a vessel carrying 8 asylum seekers was intercepted and turned back to Indonesia in January this year. The government denying that it's chosen to release this information now to distract from further scrutiny of its Border Force patrols in Australian waters, with figures released under Freedom of Information laws revealing patrols by the Cape-class fleet decreased dramatically during the last election campaign, dropping from more than 127 patrols in March last year to just 14 in April. Labor insists the government must explain why they were scaled back. Anne?
Olivia Leeming in Canberra. Thank you, Olivia. A man armed with a machete has stormed a petrol station in Sydney overnight. Police are now on the hunt for the offender who threatened staff and stole cash. Natasha Squarey has more.
Well, and detectives don't have a lot to work with at the moment. The suspect was dressed in black, wearing gloves and had his face covered. So detectives are asking any drivers who were near the service station last night to check their dash cams for possible vision. They're also hoping members of the public might recognise something about this suspect who was captured on security cameras holding up the family business in St Andrews late last night. 19-year-old Jartin Sarwell was working alone when he saw the armed thief approaching, and he moved quickly to lock the door, but somehow the suspect still managed to get inside. Armed with a machete, the robber told the teenager to hand over the cash or he'd kill him. The uni student only started this job 2 months ago.
I was terrified. I couldn't think of anything more. I was just hearing him out, what he's saying, and what can I do to get rid of him.
Despite being a little shaken up today, the teenager will return to work tomorrow. Anne?
Thanks, Natasha. Next in 7 News, new concerns for victims of the bushfires on the New South Wales South Coast, and an important victory for Democrat hopeful Joe Biden over main rival Bernie Sanders. Border Force officers have intercepted up to $300 million worth of the drug ice in Sydney. It was discovered in a shipment that arrived from Southeast Asia last month. Officers noticed inconsistencies in the air cargo consignment and found 400 kilograms of the drug. Bushfire victims on the New South Wales South Coast could be forced out of their temporary accommodation by tourists over Easter. The recovery effort is also being hampered by health concerns. Peter Fegan is there.
Well, for the people of Lake Conjola, it's frustration that they're now feeling. The reason being is that construction on their new homes can't commence until all this asbestos has been removed and safely stored. They've continuously been told by both government and council that that process will commence shortly, but 2 months on and still nothing. And for many of them, the clock is ticking because under their insurance policies, they only have 12 months of temporary accommodation. This clean-up effort, they've been told, will take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years to complete. And on top of that, that temporary accommodation has now been made unavailable over the Easter break because holidaymakers are willing to pay more. And they've also learned yesterday that their free counselling services will now start to scale back.
I think they'll have suicides because people can't cope.
There's a common question that not just the people of Lake Conjola but all the affected people on the South Coast want answered by the government, and that is, where is the money?
Thanks, Peter. Pete Buttigieg is dropping out of the Democratic Party presidential race following a crushing loss in the South Carolina primary. The first openly gay mayor presidential candidate finished well behind Joe Biden in the vote. For Biden, it's seen as a big step towards reviving his campaign to win the Democratic nomination to take on Donald Trump for the presidency.
For all of those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
Biden is using the win to urge Democrats to choose him over Senator Bernie Sanders in the lead-up to the next round of voting dubbed Super Tuesday. Pope Francis has addressed pilgrims at the traditional Sunday blessing in St Peter's Square. At times he coughed during the service and told the crowd he won't be attending an upcoming retreat because of a bad cold. It's the first time in his 7-year papacy that he's missed the retreat, which marks the start of Lent. Next in 7 News, for Jackie Felgate, including our Aussie Rugby Sevens men's team, go down fighting in a trans-Tasman clash. Also, an injury blow for St Kilda as another AFLW player suffers an ACL injury.
Good morning. Star Magpie Adam Treloar is in major doubt for round one after injuring his hamstring in the club's 40-point win over Richmond in a pre-season clash.
He's grabbing that left hamstring. I think he's just had a little strain, which is incredibly disappointing at this stage of pre-season.
Essendon's Connor McKenna is set to return to training in the coming days and should be available for the start of the season. The 23-year-old recently returned home to Ireland after feeling homesick. Carlton have spoiled Crows star Erin Phillips' highly anticipated return from a knee reconstruction with an 8-point win over Adelaide at Richmond Oval in Adelaide. The Crows led for most of the game, but the Blues managed to redeem themselves after last year's grand final loss.
Those last 5 minutes we were actually dead, and we only kept going because we wanted to celebrate this with each other.
At Moorabbin, injuries struck St Kilda in their 1-point loss to Freo. It looks like Tani White will be the 11th player this season to do an ACL, while Kate McCarthy left the ground with another knee injury. In Brisbane, the Lions beat GWS Giants 51-23. Cronulla centre Josh Morris has reminded the club why he's worth fighting for in the Sharks' 28-16 win over Manly. Morris is trying to facilitate a release from the club to join twin Brett at the Roosters. Tigers captain Moses Mbye is racing to be fit for round one after limping off with a knee injury in their trial against the Warriors. His side came from behind to win 20-6.
I suppose on the positive note, the boys hung in there, dug deep, and I thought we played the type of footy we wanted to play in the second half.
The Tigers play the Dragons in round one. Melbourne City have surged back into second place on the A-League ladder with a 1-0 win over Brisbane Roar at Melbourne's Amy Park. Josh Brelante's long-range volley in the 55th minute sealed the win.
He got a touch of fortune. It rebounded in off the goalkeeper, who otherwise has been excellent tonight. But City lead, and on balance, deservedly so.
Western United piled more misery on last-placed Central Coast Mariners, defeating them 6-2. United's Max Burgess scored a hat-trick. The Cairns Taipans have sent their NBL semi-final series to a third and deciding game against the Perth Wildcats. Needing a win to stay alive in the finals, the home side blew Perth off the court in the opening quarter. Cameron Oliver starred with 22 points and 19 rebounds. And our Aussie Rugby Sevens men's team have missed out on a medal at the LA Sevens, going down to trans-Tasman rivals New Zealand by 2 points. Locked at 14-all in the second half, the Aussies lost a man to a yellow card and the Kiwis pounced on the advantage.
The offload away beautifully. And the pass there from Warbrick finds the man that's just come on, Timmy Mickelson.
The Aussies fought back with a last-minute try but missed the conversion to go down 21-19. Not the best way to wrap up Monday's
What an
sport,
exciting
Anne.
finish. Thanks a lot, Jackie. See you. Next in 7's Morning News, the national weather forecast with David Brown. Let's check our weather forecast now with David Brown. Morning, Brownie. How's it looking today?
Yes, good morning, Anne. It's another cool day for the southern states as monsoonal moisture heads for the red centre and New South Wales by midweek. In fact, let's check out the forecast rainfall totals building this working week. Have a look at the light blue. That indicates totals of around 50 to 100 millimetres, and of course that's great news, especially for our farmers in New South Wales and also the northeast corner of Victoria. I was nearly going to say New South Wales. To the weather wall, let's have a look at that now, shall we? We're popping into Perth. Beautiful day. Forecast top around 29 degrees. Melbourne, it's cool and cloudy. For Sydney, it's hot today. Forecast top 36 degrees, but there is a cool change on the way. It should arrive around late afternoon. And in Brisbane, it's fine today, and a forecast high of around 33 degrees. From the satellite, we can track that monsoonal moisture making its way towards the red centre. This is the cool change I'm expecting to sweep through Sydney around 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's a dry change, but having said that, we'll start to see a mixture of showers and storms building across the interior of New South Wales, gradually spilling towards the coast as the day wears on. In fact, we should see some rain in the Harbour City for tomorrow afternoon. Just some light falls at this stage, but it will build as the week goes on. For Melbourne, it's fine, cloudy, around 21 degrees. Perth tomorrow, clear skies, 31. That's the latest weather. More at 4.
Thank you, Brownie. And that is 7 News to Now. We'll keep you right up to date throughout the day. Our next bulletin is at 4 p.m. I'm Ann Sanders. Thanks for your company. Have a lovely day.